And again, thanks especially to Darren
Here.
for coming right after a long road trip. And his wife, where are you? Where is she? There you are. Thank you for coming with him. Appreciate it. What's your name again?
Melody.
Melody. Thank you, Melody. And really lucky that Scott Turner, sorry, Scott Turner, introduced me to Scott Wright. I got it right. Lots of Scott Wright. And because when this Scott found out we were going to do this tonight, he said, I know somebody that could do a beautiful indigenous flute solo. So I'm excited to hear you do that for us. Thank you. And then you're going to accompany, right? This other Scott is going to accompany on the drum. So I think that'll be a beautiful, beautiful way to do this. So the bios are always online. ThinkAgain-FaithAgain.live. Got the cards, there's little square blue cards over there. If you're don't know the website, or if you're not on my email, you can grab one of those. And I have a head cold, so I'm sorry. I'm doing the best I can here. So, and again, this group, this conversation would not work well if you all didn't show up. So I appreciate you so much being willing to show up and share your thoughts and your hearts. And we'll go into the 3 rules. Basically, come curious, come compassionate, and come willing to share. And that's pretty much it. And have fun, right, when you're here. So I thought it would be useful, sometimes land acknowledgments can be a bit pretentious, and I don't want to do that. I do want us to think about, for a moment, maybe we could just sit and close our eyes, and I'll kind of just do a brief little meditation about what might have gone on in this place once upon a time, and just to kind of get us settled in, and then we'll go to the music and then Darren. Let's take a few breaths. Feel the land beneath you, beneath your feet, land that has been here for millions of years. And I want you to try to picture this valley as it was before the pioneers came here. So, not near as many trees. Obviously, no houses. Just beautiful desert. And a hopefully fairly full Great Salt Lake. And a clean Jordan River. And imagine the Ute, the Goshute, and Shoshone, people moving through here, even fishing up in Mill Creek near us, and hunting, gathering, growing, children playing, elders dispensing wisdom, a people at peace within and with their environment, living in relationship as kin with all the world around them, not as supervisors or managers, extractors, contractors, stockbrokers, profiteers, but as familial recipients of the gifts of the earth, to share such gifts and assist the tribe, the community, and their animal and plant kin, so all would have enough. Living in a reciprocity, rooted in gratitude and humility. All right, thank you. Okay, my fine musicians. Neither of you look real indigenous, but that's okay.
Definitely not. I'm just human. That's all.
I didn't mention the dinosaurs that were here before either. So there's lots of indigenous, right?
Before I start playing, I'm going to play a Native American flute, and Scott's going to play this drum that my wife Lorraine made. This is a buffalo skin drum, a 20-inch drum, and it's got a really nice, beautiful, deep sound. But this is a double flute, so it plays both sides. It's got 2 holes here, plays the melody on one side and a drone on the other side, so we'll incorporate that into what we play. But before we get started, I want to acknowledge a couple of people. My good friend Jeff Olson showed up. I didn't know you were going to be here.
Yeah, I feel really lucky Jeff's here today. It's good.
We've shared this space and played music and drums together a lot, so good to see you, brother. Good to see you up on your feet.
Yes. Yeah, you had
a terrible accident recently. So, but it's my honor to be here, especially to play for something that Darren's involved in. He and I met through Jeff Olson. Several years back, we did an event together in Star Valley, Wyoming. And through that, I started to have a realization that the events that he's going to describe tonight affected my life and the life of my family in a very profound way. Our ancestors, Darren's literal ancestors and my literal ancestors, played together as children around Brigham City. My great-grandfather was Amos Wright, and he moved with the pioneers here and lived in Brigham City and learned the language of the Shoshone when he was a child through that interaction, through that communion that he had with them. And as he and I were having discussions about that through the story that he told, this massacre that occurred on the Bear River was in 1863, January of 1863. And my great-grandfather moved to the Bear Lake Valley as an Indian interpreter in October of 1863. He came to help calm the waters. He came to help settle that valley. Charles C. Rich was the apostle that was in charge of that. He's also a relative from my grandmother's side. So we know how that all goes, how it's all intermingled with lots of polygamy and stuff. But it's my honor to play this music through this instrument for something that Darren's involved in. And he's been with my brothers and I to the site. We've rubbed shoulders quite a bit, so it's my honor to be here to do that. And I've challenged Scott because I don't come here with a song ready to play. To me, music it's something we can connect to. We can let it flow through us instead of trying to think something up or make it into something. So I'm challenging him to just drum something, and then I'm going to play something with something. We'll find out what that is. So I'll turn that over to you, Scott.
I haven't played this drum before.
It makes it even better.
Yeah.
up here?
I guess.
That was just beautiful. Thank you so much. And there's some water. Darren is super experienced at all kinds of things, particularly talking about indigenous sacred experiences and why relationships matter and all kinds of things. I wanted to focus on a few questions from looking at his book, and several years ago he came and talked about his first book. I don't know, that was your first book, the Bear River Massacre.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, yeah, and that was a really touching and moving experience. But I kind of just wanted to ask some questions and have him respond, and you guys can ask questions, because a lot of you are familiar with Darren and have read a number of his things. So this gives us a chance to be a little more intimate and make it more uncomfortable and maybe answer questions that have come to you. So one of the things I'd just like to start with is you sharing maybe a couple of stories of your earliest memories growing up that kind of oriented you on the path that you're on now. And stories are big for you, so.
Yeah, let's do that. Before we get started on that, though, I wrote that Bear River Massacre book in 2018, and I haven't reread it. I don't know. I haven't reread either one of them. It kind of weirds me out to think about it, but I think I would write that Bear River Massacre book just a little bit differently today. And I had somebody say, well, why? But I've grown. And it's okay to change your mind sometimes. And I find the older I get, the more liberal I get, I think. So, but I think it would be a different book today. Not the overall concept of it, but just some of the way I frame things. And so
you're not the only writer that said that. That's I think good writers express that. And that book is over there, along with two other books, his most recent one. So,
I mean, the earliest recollections for me, and thank goodness, both my parents worked. And I got dropped off at my grandmother, May Timbimbu Parry's house. I knew nothing about her other than she was my grandmother. And her house smelled like smoked buckskin. I thought every grandmother's house smelled that way until I went to somebody else's house. But growing up at the feet of an elder, of a tribal elder who survived boarding school, who was a woman growing up in the 30s and 40s and 50s, and women didn't have a voice, but I'll tell you, little brown women certainly didn't have a voice. But the impact she had on me, we'd go down to Antelope Island a lot and go on plant walks. And all of a sudden she'd start singing a song to the lake. She had a healing song for the lake. But she would sing songs to the plants, the rabbit brush and the sagebrush. And I grew up just looking at those things differently. And then quite often she would meet with groups, as I meet with groups at the Bear River Massacre site quite often. She did the same thing. I didn't make up that ritual. It was passed down. And so to sit, and she would sit under, you know where the monument is, there's an old Russian olive there that people hang things in. I call it the honor tree, but she would put her chair right under that tree because it was the only shade within a mile, and she would meet whoever was meeting her that day. And she'd put a blanket down for everybody, and she would start rehearsing her history and her story. She took me over to the actual site, because that's not where the massacre took place. And we would sit on this edge, and she'd say, that's where my grandfather, Dabuzi, which means rabbit, that's where he played dead. And that's the only way he survived, is lying among the dead. And she'd point out these certain places where our people mostly fell. And so I just grew up with a different worldview of things. She talked about the plants and animals and rocks as kin. I thought everybody looked at those things as kinfolk. I didn't know anything different until I got educated. Well, I don't know if educated is the right word, but until I learned a different way, a colonial way of expression. So I just grew up with a different worldview of the surroundings that I lived in, not really understanding anything other than what I'd been taught by a beautiful, loving grandmother. She'd tell me stories, and if I looked disinterested in any way, or tired, or yawned, heaven forbid the story time was over, because I needed to hear every word the way she'd heard every word. When you're relying on oral history to pass down knowledge, and not only knowledge, but to pass down sacred values, because that's really what I think this whole discussion tonight, and the difference between worldviews and indigenous views, is a value system. And I know they both had them at one point, but a value system that guides every decision that we make with the environment and with each other. And so I just grew up differently, not having any preconceived ideas about anything other than we're all equal and we all have rights to exist and survive and live. And I knew immediately when she's singing the songs to the lake and to different plants that those things were sacred to her too. And so I was born and raised in Syracuse, of all places too, which right on the shores of the Great Salt Lake. So those stories always meant something more to me, because I grew up with knowing that lake intimately, and very grateful for that grandmother who taught me those certain value systems early on in my life. But that's what shaped me really going forward.
I love that. How old were you? Did that?
As soon as I could remember. I remember tripping over the rocks a lot by the causeway. She'd let me get out and run up and down the shore when there wasn't too much water. None of you know that. None of you younger people know that. That you could actually, years we couldn't go out to the island because the water had washed out the road. And so my earliest childhood memories are always tripping over those rocks that were just on that causeway edge. And then probably 3 or 4 years old at the Bear River Massacre site. And she would sit, and the reason it was so etched in my mind, when we're sitting on the bluff overlooking the massacre site, she would say, if you're here at just the right time in the evening, you can sit and you can hear the cries of the little ones crying for their mothers. And that kind of scared me as a child. I'm pretty sure I don't want to see or hear that. But she believed it, and I think she'd heard it, and she was that in tune with her surroundings and nature and the spirits. If I believe what she taught me, everything has a spirit, then our interaction with everything changes. And so it changed me, and it changed me early on, thank goodness.
That's beautiful. How long did you have that relationship with her? Did she last quite long?
She did. She was 86. I remember sitting in her home. She was probably 83 or 84. I had 3 boys at the time, and we were visiting Purple Grandma. My boys called her Purple Grandma because she was dark. She was really dark. And her lips looked purple. She was so dark. But my kids grew up thinking, let's go to Purple Grandma's house. And so we'd go to Purple Grandma's house. And I remember sitting in her kitchen. Everything happened in the kitchen. The pile of beads on the table, stew on the stove, fresh homemade bread. That was the spot. That was the gathering place. But she gets a phone call, and she says, yeah, I can. She said, Grant, can you run me down to the airport? She'd didn't drive a day in her life. And so my grandfather drove her everywhere. And so he said, yeah, I can do that. And she gets off the phone and I said, who was that? And she said, it was President Clinton, and he wanted to know if I had a few minutes that I could go down and visit with him before he flies out. He's been meeting with the church leaders. And I just thought, okay. And I was kind of a rambunctious dad. I said, Grandma, it's President Clinton. And, we'd know everything had already happened with President Clinton. So, and I said, just be careful. And she just looked at me like, you really said that? But yeah, it was another level of, okay. My grandma was
Special.
pretty special. And she had a lot of connections, and I'm still finding things that she did, because I'm writing her biography now. And I'm finding out things that she did from stories. My dad passed away recently, but I went down and interviewed him extensively about my grandmother and her childhood and what he could remember. And so, man, I'm still learning things about May Timbimbu Parry, and I'll probably spend the rest of my life learning things about her. So, but she was the biggest influence on me by a mile.
Sounds like
thank goodness. So,
yeah. Are you able to retain? I'm a grandparent, so what things what things do you do as a grandparent to try to keep those traditions going? Indigenous.
I'm a terrible grandparent, and I'm kind of half joking, but I'm really attentive when they're around, but I'm not around a lot. I wish I was.
Because your place is like this.
I wish I was around more for my grandkids, and hopefully one day I'll be able to spend way more time with that. But I go to all their elementary schools, and they all know how to drum. They all know how to powwow dance, and so
nice.
They know who they are. They may be 1/8 Shoshone, but if you ask them who they are, they'll say they're Shoshone. And that to me means everything. Yeah. And so just sharing little stories with them that are age appropriate, because Shoshones were storytellers. That's how we passed along culture, history, but especially values. And those values were critical in living that life I heard you describe in your intro, of reciprocity and relationships and balance and those types of things. And so, very grateful for that.
That's nice. Thank you. We're going to touch on some of those themes. So, in this latest book, Tending the Sacred, I noticed the first couple of chapters, maybe 2 or 3, focus on healing. And I was curious, why did you start out that way in this book, with healing?
Because I came from a group of people who experienced intergenerational trauma that still exists today. And not only our tribe, many indigenous tribes deal with this intergenerational trauma. And so for me, it was a real easy thing. I think we solve all the problems in the world if we can all heal. And so healing became a central focus of that, healing, forgiveness, and other things. But I think the only way we solve our problems today is finding ways in our life that we can heal. We all have things we can heal from. Every one of us, I don't care who we are. And finding ways to navigate those difficult relationships and difficult situations we find ourselves in. And so, more along those lines. It was just growing up, hearing the stories of my people, saying where all the people died, and that's where most of the bodies are. Nobody was ever buried that day. And so that is still a sacred burial ground to us. And hearing her tell those stories, it just brings back to me the opportunity that we have to, I think Native peoples, I think our biggest problem is our inability to forgive and our inability to be able to heal because we've forgiven. I think if we can find a space that we can forgive people and not hit white people over the head with this hard history all the time, I think then we have a chance to really get past that and heal. So healing is always a focal point with me. And even, I spoke at a junior high the other day in downtown Salt Lake, and I said, if you don't remember one thing, and I talked about the Bear River Massacre, I just said, the biggest lesson I learned about the Bear River Massacre is to always offer unconditional forgiveness. Doesn't mean you need to forget, but always find a way in your life to offer unconditional forgiveness. And so I just feel like that's the key to everything today.
So how do you, especially the last, decade, there's a strong impetus towards social justice.
Yeah.
So how do you balance trying to get justice and forgive and healing? Because I agree with you. I think there's such a need for that, and that's why, for me, this broader discussion is not just about our environment, but indigenous peoples like the Shoshone tribe are not the only ones that have trouble forgiving. I mean, you just need to look at the Middle East, right? I mean, the Middle East has been going over those same injuries for so long.
Yeah.
And so anyway, how does that work?
I love this topic because I have a little booklet over there that I gave a lecture at Harvard in November of 24, and they selected that. They select 2 a year to publish. And there's a little green booklet over there that's available, but it's my lecture that they made available. And so I got to speak at the pulpit that Ralph Waldo Emerson stood at and gave a talk where he was, at the end of it, they banned him from Harvard for 21 years.
Oh, gosh.
They didn't tell me that until after my talk. Because I said I would have gone for 22. Who is he? I mean, but I talked about indigenizing the academy, how we transform, and one of the big things is, what if our law schools focused on restorative justice? I think the way we all frame justice in the world today is we need to hold somebody accountable. I mean, that's how we look at things. And we need to find somebody to blame. That's justice. We need to hold, so all of those things point to this justice. To an indigenous person, though, we look at justice as something being out of balance. That's all. And what can we do to restore balance? And conflict is not necessarily a bad thing, but let's look at the problem a little differently. Instead of assigning blame, instead of looking at it from that lens, why don't we look at it as a way to, something must be out of balance, and what can we do to restore it? And so when we're talking about justice and forgiveness, you can't have one without the other. They both need to coexist. And I mean, I think justice says, asks the question, who can we blame? Forgiveness says, how do we restore balance? And so you just reframe the same thing differently and look at the problem differently. And so we live in a Western world of education and everything else that we need to blame people. It's easy to say, look at the world and the political, well, I'm not going to start down that road. But look at some of the things we're dealing with as society today. And we want to blame somebody. Those are not my people. That's not my tribe. That's somebody else. It's easy to blame them, and it's easy to assign those things to people. But let's look at it differently and say, how can we restore balance, and how can we get past these things? It becomes very easy. I've been asked a lot, how do you always talk about hard things, but you really don't make people angry and not want to listen to you? Yeah, because most of the time, I have a friend that's a Ute leader, and I won't say his name, but it's Sean Chapoose. So, hi, Sean. But one day I told him, I said, Sean, you speak so loudly that people can't hear you. And what I meant by that is he just is relentless in holding people accountable for past decisions that his ancestors made. Not him, not the people that are here today, but their ancestors did to his people. And when you hit people in the head long enough and you're relentless about it, people put up defenses and they don't want to have anything to do with you. They won't listen to you. But I've always found that we're willing to have hard conversations. I think we're all willing to sit down and have those hard conversations as a way to find out what we need to do to make it better. I never focus on the Bear River Massacre as I said to the church historian and Bishop Kosei in a meeting. The church historian kind of got after me because he thought I was blaming the church for the massacre.
And that's because of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Not everybody is a member of the church that comes to these, but yeah.
Yeah, so it started out, I just explained a quick history of what happened, and he got mad and said the saints didn't kill anybody. And I just said, well, I believe that. I don't think the saints fired a bullet, but they were absolutely the cause of what happened. And so I think we can have hard conversations as long as we talk about hard history. I talk about truth-telling. We're all willing to hear the truth. But then let's find a way to move past that. Because to dwell on those things doesn't do any of us any good. What can we do together as a society to restore balance again and make it better? That should be the end goal for every one of us in every conflict we have. To me, let's don't stay in this where we're at. This is tension. This is not good on any of our personal health. But let's find a way forward. And when we start talking forgiveness, doesn't mean we forget, but when we start talking that way instead of, I want a pound of flesh from you, then we have a chance to move forward and make the world a better place for all of us. And it allows all of us to heal. Many of us from the wounds that we don't even see. Social media has doomed us almost to, we see everybody's highlight reel all the time. But I'm telling you, people are hurting. They're hurting and we don't see that. They don't post those things. And so, but what if we made a conscious effort to try to forgive people and get in spaces that we can sit down and actually have a conversation about making things better. And I talk so much about restoring balance, and that's all we need to start doing again. But you have to be able to sit down and listen to each other to do that. But forgiving people, that's the best way to start, I think. Not assigning blame, but sit down and having hard conversations that lead into productive work that comes out of it at the end.
A hard conversation is acknowledging that the injury was done.
Sure.
And people were hurt. And even going generations to now, that carries forward.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow, so how do you have an example or two of that? I know that you've had some success with the LDS Church. And that's an interesting case study, right? Because there were some positive things, but then they did some just amazingly terrible things, more than, in the 60s, early 60s too.
Sure.
So, not just the massacre.
The church is a complicated
It's complicated.
and the history is a complicated thing. I have a lot of friends that are academics and not only in higher ed, but they're historians. And if you're a historian that studies church history, then you've got all kinds of issues.
Yeah.
You could have all kinds of issues if you allow it to. And so, yeah, looking at hard history and looking at things that we've never wanted to talk about. I talk a lot especially to the elementary kids, and I've gone to 64 fourth grade classes this year. Just this year, but we talk a lot about who gets to tell the story. And I quote Winston Churchill quite a bit, that history is only written by the victors. And then we talk about monuments and who gets to not only write the history, but who gets to memorialize it. And I said, have you guys ever gone on a family vacation and stopped at a monument and read the placards? And I said, how does it make you feel? And they said, well, we just read them. And I said, do you think there's another side of the story that's not being told? I said, sometimes the part that's not being told is the best part of the story. And I said, you know how lucky you guys are to live in a day and age that you're one little click away from finding out the other side of the story? When I was growing up, my dad would have had to buy every encyclopedia selling them stuff when they came by to find out any of that, and then it still wouldn't have been in there. And so I think it's easy to get to the truth now, but just looking at that historical perspective from multiple views. And I always frame the massacre as, here's my story, here's our people's story. I'm not telling you it's the truth. I mean, it's our truth, but it may not be your truth. And it may not be the pioneers or the settlers' truth. But I think if you learn multiple perspectives and you look at it honestly, then you can come up with where you see the truth. And many people in our lives have a say in what that truth is. What your parents talked about around the kitchen table when you were having dinner as a child shapes how you view historical perspectives. And it's not good or bad, it's just how it is. And so we have to know we're not the only ones that come into these conversations. It's every conversation you've ever had with people that have influenced you in some way has shaped how you view the world in certain events. And so coming from a group of people that my grandma said all the time, Darren, no one has ever wanted to hear our story before. One day you will have to make them listen. And I'm telling you, I didn't understand what she meant. And I do now. I know what she was saying because her lived experience was that, for sure. But my lived experience is not that. I think I teach at the University of Utah in the fall, Utah State in the spring. Kids want to know, and they're thirsting for this knowledge. And I've never had to make anybody listen. But I can certainly see why she would have said that to me and made it a focal point, because that was her lived experience. And so, but that's not mine. So we're just at a different place today.
Yeah. But who you are, carrying that story forward has been very healing and helpful.
And I hope
in lots of areas,
for me
not just the
has,
massacre,
yeah,
but
for me it has.
in the environment and helping school kids be more grounded in the natural world because of what you're doing.
Yeah.
So that's really, really remarkable.
Did you have a question?
Yeah.
I was going to say, you guys.
How would you
have
describe
questions?
the imbalance that occurred in Cache Valley or wherever what was the imbalance that caused the conflict? And can you explain? You talk about imbalance. What was the imbalance?
Well, I just think the narrative that the LDS people have, the pioneers, I always want to say Mormons, and President Nelson would be so disappointed in me. But the pioneers, I mean, you got to look at their view, and I'm not faulting them at all. They had this belief in a church. They believed it was their God-given right. They were led to this land, and now they get here and there's people occupying this land. We can do anything in the name of religion almost, and we have. And so I just felt like the pioneers, it was their God-given right to be there. And they had that worldview. we were led out here. We had many spiritual experiences that got us here. And the fact that we displaced and sometimes at the loss of life, people that were here, almost so be it. And the thing that drives me to that is many of the saints after the event happened, after the massacre happened, I don't want to minimize it, calling it an event, after the massacre, said, well, you know, and some of them from prominent church leaders said that it was an intervention from the Almighty God. And that
This sounds so much like a president nowadays.
the Army punished them without us having to do it. Henry Ballard said that. Now, not the Henry Ballard we've all grown up with, I think his grandfather or his great-grandfather. So, but many of the church leaders says it was divine intervention and called it that. And that's the way I would hope that's the way they felt like they could get past what had ever happened. I had a conversation though with an elderly woman at a fireside I gave in Logan, and she came up to me and grabbed my arm and almost whispered in my ear, "We were told never to talk about that when we were kids." And so I think at the end of what happened, I think there was a little bit of guilt about how some of them framed it and how they looked at it going forward. If that's what they're telling their children, and that's why I still speak to some that have never heard about it so much. They may have heard the name, but they really don't know anything about it. And they live 19 miles away from the largest massacre of Native peoples. So I can see why. But yeah, I think that just they had license to do whatever they needed to do to establish their Zion. And if it meant displacement of others. But the hard thing for me is, man, if they had been reading their Book of Mormon, these were a group of people that would one day play a prominent role in establishing Zion. And so that's a whole nother topic for another day. But yeah, a lot of disconnection there.
Yeah.
But I think we all do it in some kind of small ways that allows us to do certain things that probably our consciences and value systems probably would stop us at other times.
Yeah.
If it's for the greater good. So
Jeff, the people on Zoom are asking you to repeat the question after it's asked from the audience.
Good idea.
Good idea.
Thank you. Were there other hands or questions? Yes.
I did not ever know about this growing up in Utah, and I'm just realizing it's because it's Idaho history, and so Utahns didn't get told either. But now that I do know, I happen to, I would like to change the name of Connor Street in Salt Lake City.
Amen.
What would you recommend that I suggest to be changed to?
oh my
So the
goodness.
question is, there's a street named Connor, and Darren will explain why this is a big deal, and she'd like to change the name of it.
I understand that, and so
Explain who he was.
Connor was the colonel. He started out as a colonel, and he was the one that led the troops north to massacre our people. At the end, they reward him and make him brigadier general. The funny thing is, though, my office at the University of Utah is in the barrack that is right across the field from the museum. And a few years ago, his statue used to be in that little plaza until a couple of girls from the college said he shouldn't be there. And I think the university got wind that he may disappear one day, and they put him in the garden area behind the fence now. But I could still look out my window and see Connor, his statue back there. But I look at it kind of like, I don't know, there's two schools to this, and I think here's where I get in trouble sometimes. The Daughters of Utah Pioneers have that not very nice monument at the massacre site. Their plaque is not very good. And they toy with the idea of taking it down, putting it up. And I said, why don't we just put another plaque on there that tells a more accurate version of what we know today? I always give them a way to wiggle out. And then I say, please don't take your plaque down. It is such a teaching tool for me to have kids there. So I say, read this plaque. And then I say, is that what happened? It's such a powerful teaching moment for me to be able to say, look how we used to think. And if we don't change behavior, couldn't we kind of repeat this kind of same thing? And so then we go around and look at the other plaque. And I said, now read this plaque. And which is most correct, or what do you think? And I mean, fourth graders are pretty smart. And one day we were sitting there, me and probably 50 fourth graders, and we were looking at that tree that had things hanging in it. And one of the boys, and we just looked at the plaques, and it was a quiet moment and reflective moment. And one of the boys said, hey, I see a mirror hanging in the tree. Why do you think they hung a mirror in the tree? And look, I was stumped. I was frantically trying to come up with an answer to answer this fourth grade boy. And the smallest girl in the class happened to be standing right next to me. And she said, I know why it's there. And I said, what do you think? And she said, it's there to remind us that we did this. And if we don't learn from history, we'll do it again.
So found.
The hair on my neck stood up, and I thought, oh my goodness, I've been taught by a fourth grader today. And I looked over at the teacher, and she goes, and I'm going, the kids get it, and she got it. And so I begged the DUP not to take that down, because it's such a powerful, here's how your ancestors thought. Do we think that way today? Some do, but others don't. And what a powerful teaching thing it is for me. And so, yeah, it's just, it's good for me. But I understand there's certain Confederate monuments or certain things that probably need to come down, that we don't need to do that, but that's certainly not one of them for me.
Other questions?
Leave the street named Connor?
Unless they want to name it Sagwitch or something, but then the Utes would be mad. So I'm not going to get into a war with the
Tribal
Utes.
fight?
Tribal fight.
I knew you would.
Salt Lake was always kind of no man's land, and then the Goshutes would be mad too. So
There's a difference between remembering and honoring, okay?
sure.
And a street name is to honor somebody, so I say get rid of it.
We just changed another one.
That's true.
Yes. So there's a name of it. So what would you change it to?
Wakara's taken care of, and so I'm not sure.
Okay.
I haven't really thought about it enough to really have an opinion on it. Yeah, if you guys want it down, knock yourselves out.
Other questions? Yes.
What about your grandmother?
My grandmother does not have a street, so
There you go.
There you go.
maybe
That's a good
that
one.
would be
A female
good.
too would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on the Wakara thing? I'm not familiar with.
No,
Could you elaborate on the Wakara?
Wakara, that gets complicated. Who was he? And who are those people? They were Timpanogos, the Timpanogos group that lived in Cache Valley, the Utah Valley. And Brigham Young signed an extermination order in 1850 to, if they don't leave, you have the ability to exterminate them, which is still on the books today. Yeah, and so Wakara was a Timpanogos leader, and he was a leader from that group. Funny thing is, we call them Timpanogos Utes, but they spoke Shoshone language. So I mean, if we got 10 historians in this room, we'd all fight about who they were. I'm not saying they were Shoshone or Utes. I'm just telling you what they spoke. And sometimes we were mislabeled. I've been called a snake Indian. Not sure why, but some of the pioneers call their people that. Some of the Shoshone people that. So, yeah, I'm not sure how we're ever going to get to Wakara, but he was a great leader. He was very influential, and I think he became friends with Brigham Young down the road, and there's a street named after him up in that area. So they've honored him in that way. And, but there's a lot of history where we haven't told yet. And I think the Timpanogos band is one that we should dive further into. Because they're not a federally recognized tribe today. And they're trying to get federally recognized, but they're not. And so, and the state of Utah still has that extermination order on their books.
Even Missouri reversed that.
Even Missouri, yeah. So,
1980s.
yeah. So I've kind of worked with the group that's kind of wanting to get rid of that. And they want to go to the legislature, and I said, go to the church. The legislature does what the church tells them.
They're the same thing.
But it kind of is. I mean, I'll tell you what, if the legislator thought it was a good idea to get rid of that extermination order, but the church said don't touch it, it's not getting done. So take that for what it's worth.
One thing I really admire about the way you tell your story is the peace that you are grounded in. And I think for me, I'm new to feeling like the world's crazy because of my privilege and station in life. And I think I'm feeling fatigue in trying to bring my best self when it feels like there are, secret combinations kind of wearing myself down. And you obviously have far more experience than your ancestors do. And what advice do you have to find peace and resilience in these times?
That's a good question.
That's a really good question.
Do you think people heard that well enough?
Just what advice do you have?
What advice do you have about having peace and resilience in these difficult times?
I wish I could say I've always had this peace. When I was your age, I was probably not having that peace. But the older I get, the way more and more comfortable I am with it. And us older generations know what I'm talking about. There are certain things that are more, become less important to us. We don't sweat certain things that I would have sweated 20 years ago. But I'll tell you the best way I think is I had that same question asked at Harvard. So I gave the lecture, and it was the night before my wife and I went home, and we gathered behind the Divinity School around a fire, and we talked about healing and finding peace. They had just experienced the Palestinian protests at Harvard, and those students were deer in headlights, really struggling. And 30 of us sat around this fire and talked, and I was there with a Navajo elder who is a peyote chief who does ceremonies, and we talked about healing, finding peace in your life, and we talked about sweat lodges and smudging ceremonies that our people would have done to find that inner peace. And then it got quiet, and I'll tell you, quiet is a teacher. Quiet is a teacher. So I've always felt uncomfortable when we're sitting and it gets quiet for a minute. And it's probably only 5 seconds that it's quiet, but sometimes it gets our attention. But I think during those times we need to listen. But I'll tell you, it got quiet for a minute, and I was frantically trying to come up with a good answer like I am now. But you know what I found? And it came to me like a bolt. I looked at everybody there, and I look at everybody here, and what we're doing now brings that peace. gathering in community, and especially local community. If we turn on the news, it's easy to lose our minds and think we are all doomed. But when you go out and see your neighbor mowing his lawn, or go to the corner drugstore and see your friends or anybody else in your community, it restores that peace. And I think gathering in a place, and we may be all like-minded, we may not, but I think this is so healing for me, and it brings me a sense of peace that I could never find out in the world. And so gather. And then realize that we live in seasons. One thing I love about Native American culture is we honor directions, we honor seasons. And there's certain seasons in our life where the winter, I hate winter, by the way. Spring is my favorite. But for me, winter is a time to hunker down.
That's good, because we didn't have one.
Yeah, I know. And I'm very grateful for that. It may not be later this summer, but I'm very grateful. But in the winter, I'm hunkered down. I may be not feeling it physically and mentally, but it also gives you time to plan, to kind of come up with a strategy going forward. And then spring is a time of renewal and growth. And we can come out of our shell and make connections with people that can help us do that. And the other thing is put down your electrical device and go on a hike and sit down by a tree and have a conversation. Trees are our relatives. Trees need to breathe what we breathe out, but they also put off what we need to breathe. There is such this bound relationship that we share with each other. And they have a spirit. They talk to other trees, we know. And so why not sit down and have a heart-to-heart with the tree? My class, a girl asked me that, what can I do? What can I do? And I said, just maybe express gratitude. And she came to class in tears one morning, and I said, you okay? And she goes, I stopped on my way here, and we're at Utah State, so it's a beautiful campus. And she said, I stopped by this most beautiful tree, and I said a little prayer, and I talked to the tree and expressed gratitude for being so beautiful that I have always ignored on my walk to your class. And she said, it changed me. In that moment, she goes, I might go back to being normal again. But at that moment, it changed me. And that's all we can do, is look for little victories. But I think when we're struggling, find your community and gather. And I'll tell you, then we can overcome anything, I think, then. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Talk about two-eyed seeing.
Two-eyed seeing. Have you heard that term before? It's not my term. I didn't make that up. I wished I had. But another tribal indigenous elder talks about two-eyed seeing. And they're both critical. When I talk to my friends about the environment unraveling and climate change and other things, I ask them what's the answer, and they say, we'll figure it out. Because we've always pretty much been able to figure it out. We've been able to innovate our way out of it, use science as a way to solve the problems we've had. I think we're fast coming to the point, though, that we're not going to science our way out of certain things, especially when it comes to water. Science hasn't figured out how to manufacture it yet. So there's certain great things that science, this Western lens of science and technology, offers us. But there's also an indigenous lens of living in relationships, in living in reciprocity, taking only what you need and giving back, making sure that what you take is sustainable. We'd go pick choke cherries with my grandmother, and there's a big long branch of these little berries, and she would only take a few of them, here and there. And she would leave some for the bird relatives or the squirrel relatives or those who couldn't make it to the mountain that day. And so she taught me a valuable lesson on, but capitalism doesn't teach that. Capitalism would say strip that baby and strip as many of the things you can get, take as much as we can get, because that thing is a commodity now that we can exploit and take advantage of. And my grandmother always looked at it as a relative that we need to nurture and take care of, because it was our livelihood. If you're a hunter-gatherer, you absolutely relied on the earth and its bounties. And so you couldn't not live that way. And so two-eyed seeing is having this indigenous lens also, but what if we combine the two? What if we collaborated to make a different model? Look, I'm smart enough to know, and I'm not very smart, but I'm smart enough to know we're not getting rid of this capitalistic machine that we built for ourselves. Higher ed, I work for a system that perpetuates this system. So I don't think we're getting rid of it, but I think we could create a better model, a hybrid model of capitalism that injects values back into it. And when I talk about indigenous ways of seeing, I'm really talking about making decisions that are value-centered in every decision we make. Let me just give you a quick example. I gave a lecture on Earth Day in Bell, Colorado, 2 years ago. And I started my talk by talking about the Colorado River Compact, which has been in the news, and how 100 years ago, 7 delegates from 7 different states met at Bishop's Lodge in New Mexico to hammer out how much water we're going to allocate for the 7 states. Herbert Hoover was the chair. And I said they met behind closed doors. After a week they came out, said we've got an agreement. Never mind, they gave away twice as much water that was actually even in the Colorado River. But I asked an important question. I said, do you know who wasn't there? And they looked at me and I said, the 30 federally recognized indigenous people that have used the Colorado River Basin. But then I asked the more important question. What if they had been there? What if they'd had a seat at the table 100 years ago as they were hammering out how to allocate water? Would we be in the predicament that we're in today if we had injected indigenous value systems into water rights and water use? And I think the answer is clear from every one of us. Even if you're a non-believer, I think as we inject indigenous, not only indigenous values, but certain value systems into our decisions, that we wouldn't be in the predicament that we're in today. Because we've left the value systems completely out of it. And so I think that shapes this two-eyed seeing, as being able to look in both lenses to make a better decision. We need innovation. We need all the best that sciences can provide us. That solving the problems of the Great Salt Lake, solving climate change, solving all those things, you guys, they're not science problems. They're values problems. All the science in the world won't make up for our selfish behaviors. And so the only way we combat that is being able to look both ways and see it from both perspectives.
Yes?
I'd love to talk about that a little bit more when it comes to the Great Salt Lake. So what in your mind is, I know that's a dear issue to you, but what in your mind is the role of indigenous wisdom for us right now?
So the question is, what is the role of indigenous wisdom for us right now with the Great Salt Lake?
Yeah.
And maybe I had a similar question, even broader. Politically, let's start with the Great Salt Lake. How can that actually be a catalyst to get indigenous wisdom and those values in our political sphere, everywhere. But starting with the Great Salt Lake, solving just a critical problem right now for us here.
Well, that's a great question, and when you figure it out, let me know. Because look, the governor, he is committed to filling the lake, not just saving it, filling it by 2034, the Olympics. It just is not going to happen. It's a math problem. And so he's formed all these commissions, boards. We've got the brightest minds looking at the problem and solving it. We've got money, $1 billion, I heard lately. But it's not a money problem. It's a values problem. And so how many indigenous people are on these boards? Not one. Not one.
Wow.
And so I've been pretty adamant about it lately and loud about it, hoping I get there, they'll just put me on it and shut up. But I'm still not invited, and I don't think we will be. Because my wife and I talk about it all the time. She says, what if they invite you on and they're going to say, okay, what are you going to do to solve it? And so, I mean, it's just complicated, and it's a complete mindset change. It's not, indigenous wisdom isn't a museum piece that we can pull out and adopt that piece and we save the world or save the Great Salt Lake. It's a way of living. It's a complete way of making decisions, looking at the land not as a commodity but a relative that we nurture and care for. It blows my mind that we think we should own water. Water is like air to me. It's probably the only two things that we have to have, every one of us. We can't live without. And the fact that your relatives moved here in 1850 and homesteaded 300 acres up in Cache Valley and said, now this water is all mine, and even coined a term, first in time, first in right, unless you were Native American. So the fact that we own water is just crazy to me. If I could do one thing, I would take away everybody's water right and say, tell us your need. If we lived in Avon in the Cache Valley for a long time, and all our neighbors sold it to China. They weren't quiet about it either. At one point, they were getting really good prices from China. So thousands of acres of alfalfa going to China, and they're watering the crap out of this crop all the time. And so, I mean, if I'm holding the water rights now and say, what are we doing with your land? I'll allocate you back what you need, but it might not be as much as you think you deserve or have had in the past. And when I said it was a math problem, all of us, we may not understand the Great Salt Lake, but we understand our finances. We can't spend double what we make and expect it to not be a problem one day. Now, we can put it off, we can get credit cards, and charge up, and delay it. But at the end of the day, we got to get water to the lake. How do we do that when we keep developing, like we've got unlimited supplies, we're building data centers, and we've relied on, and every time I turn on the news, the Speaker of the House is trumping how we have the #1 economy, #1 place for jobs in the country, but I just don't see how we have the water infrastructure to just keep bringing millions of people here and developing like we develop and not expect it to be a problem one day. We divert water for people, but you keep bringing people, we're diverting more water, which the lake needs the water if we're going to save it. We rely on the snowpack from the lake. If the lake's not there, we don't get the snow. It's one thing my grandmother taught me all the time is we're all connected. Everything is connected. Now they tell me there's groundwater under the Great Salt Lake. Heaven forbid, I don't even know what they're going to do with that. Vegas might try to take it. But what if you drain that aquifer under the lake? I mean, could we have more earthquakes? You just start messing with things. If you believe everything's connected, if this was a big web and I pulled on this edge of the web, it would reverberate through the whole place. And so if you look at things that way, everything has a consequence completely distant from what you may have thought. And so we still don't have a voice as far as it comes to the Great Salt Lake, and I don't expect to ever have one. I don't think we save the Great Salt Lake, and I'm full of hope. I teach students every day, and they give me hope that we do it. But it's still, at the end of the day, it's that same math problem. If we can't control development, and if I hear another farmer say, well, do you want to eat food? You know, we're farming for food. I don't know when the last time I ate a Utah vegetable. If I shop at a grocery store, when I had a Utah vegetable and a Utah steak. I wished everything was local. We grew everything we need, but that's just not reality. So I think there's ways we can go towards changing it. I think the conversation is, how long do we prevent it from going dry? How many years can we prolong this thing? Because I think letting it go dry is going to be a disaster for you guys in this area. Well, for everywhere. Yeah, but especially
all the fowl
this
birds
way.
And
oh yeah, the bird relatives, and so yeah, I think we're in a tough place. And until now, I'm holding out hope. I think the legislature will end up doing the right thing, and it's not more money. It's just not more money. But most of the legislature are developers or ranchers. They'll make the right decision when they absolutely have to, because there's no other alternative. And that's pretty getting close to the edge of not being able to come back. And that's just my opinion, but I wish I had more hope than that. But at the end of the day, what they can't tell me is how much water are we going to get next winter? Are we going to have that 2 winters ago winter that we would love? Or are we going to get what we got this last year, or less? And if you can't tell me how much water we're going to get, how can you tell me what we're going to do? I did a really good social media post on the Great Salt Lake. And I talk about, we've been talking about this problem 6 years. Hundreds of millions of dollars, 6 years. And they say every year we're doing something, we're doing something. And from 6 years ago to today, we're 1 foot lower. Hundreds of millions of dollars. And legislation to say we're saving it. At what point are we going to start filling it? I don't think anybody could tell me. And especially to fill it to a point that it's healthy again. And so it kind of has me worried a little bit, but we just need to change behavior. And that's a tough thing. I mean, it's just not changing one little thing. It's changing our behaviors. We can all do something though, I think. So we need to start. Oh no, when my wife raises her hand, that's not a good thing.
Talk about the commercial that we talked about.
Oh yeah,
this is the
storytelling.
Littering,
Yeah. So you older people in here, you younger people won't remember this, but there was a public service commercial on TV, and I think they shot it out at Monument Valley. It's that road that Forrest Gump ran on, where nothing is ever anywhere but red rock and desert. And the country had a littering problem. A car is screaming down the road, 2 kids in the back seat, brother and sister, fighting, smacking each other, giggling, eating fast food. They get done with it and they chuck it out the window. Well, there happens to be a person standing on the side of the road. And the garbage hits at his feet. And it slowly pans up. And it's a Native American man. And then he turns his cheek and there's a tear coming down his cheek. The commercial didn't say one word. And a few months later, I was in the dentist office with my 3 boys. And they were getting checkups, and you grab a magazine off the rack, and there was a Time magazine article that said that commercial stopped like 80% of the pollution that was taking place in America.
The littering.
Overnight, the littering problem. Overnight. With a commercial that didn't say one thing. And I think that speaks to the power of storytelling. I love to tell stories, and natives lived in storytelling because it makes us learn from here, not here. We will always forget facts and figures. I think if I went around the room and asked each one of you to list 5 things that cause climate change, or 5 things you could do to save water, no problems. But that doesn't change behavior. None of us have changed behavior because of it. But I think every one of you can remember how you felt when you heard a story that really resonated and touched your heart in a way that commercial touched America's heart. And I think if we're going to save the lake, we need more storytelling. We need more poetry. We need more music. We need those things that engage us here and not here. And then we change behavior, I think. It makes it easier to change behavior.
So good.
And we can do that in conversations, one-on-one, or groups, or
Absolutely.
at schools like you do, or so that's kind of where you derive your hope, I guess.
It is, and just
and telling the stories
telling
and
the
seeing
stories.
behaviors change, even just a little bit here and there.
let me share. Can I share a quick story with
Sure.
you? I share before I leave every 4th grade class. I share this story with them, and it's a story. My grandmother had this beautiful bald eagle headdress on her mantle above her fireplace. And she said it was Chief Sagwich's headdress. And so I'd walk in her house and see this every day. I knew that only chiefs got to wear those headdresses. And I wanted to wear it. But I didn't dare ask her if I could wear it because I knew what the answer would be. So one day I thought I'd kind of trick her, and I said, Grandma, I want to be a chief one day. Thinking that might do it. And she said, sit down and let me tell you a story. She said, when a young Shoshone boy, and now when I tell the story, I include girls, because we have girl chiefs today. And I don't want to leave them out. And so I said, when a young Shoshone boy or girl does an act of kindness or service, the chief and the tribe would give them 1 eagle feather. And then she said to me, what do you think would happen if that boy kept doing kind things for people? And I said, well, they'd get more eagle feathers. And she said, you're right. She said, did you know that one day when the chief gets ready to transition to the next world, death was never a scary thing. It was just, we were going on a journey. She said, one day when the chief gets ready to do that, and the chief is always the chief until they pass, he will call everybody together. And he will say, I'm about to meet my next journey. I need to select a new chief. I want you all to pull out eagle feathers and show them to me. And she told me the most important thing. She said that it was the person that had the most eagle feathers would become the new chief. She said the chief wasn't the bravest or the toughest or the strongest. The chief is the one who led a life of service and kindness in his community. So she said, if you want to wear that, you go be a chief. And then she said, go be a good sibling. Be a good friend at recess if somebody doesn't have anybody to play with. Sit with somebody at lunch that doesn't have a lunch partner. Be that kind of person. And if you're that kind of a person, you'll become a leader in your community. Leadership that's not rooted in power and authority, but in love and kindness and wisdom. And my goodness, isn't that the kind of leaders the world needs today? And so I share that with every 4th grade class I leave. Last year, I had a teacher from Promontory Elementary, send me a picture. And it was her whole back wall of her class, huge back wall, covered in paper eagle feathers that had been colored by each student. Then she sends me a text and says, when you shared that story, the kids came back and said, we wish we could give eagle feathers for kind deeds and stuff, and acts of service. And so they came up with the idea, print a eagle feather on a piece of paper. If a child does something kind for somebody, they couldn't nominate themselves. Whoever the deed was done for would come in and say, Johnny did something really nice for me, and said what. Johnny then got to put his name on the eagle feather and color it and put it on the wall. She said, I've been teaching 22 years and I have never had a year like this, where kids are almost obnoxiously going out of their way to help and serve each other. She said, it's the most remarkable thing I've ever seen. And she said, one story transformed this whole 4th grade into powerful kids that wanted to be of service and kindness. And so we can change behaviors with stories. And maybe it's one person at a time, one neighborhood at a time, but one interaction that we have at a time. If it's just a smile, so be it. My wife gets mad at me probably because I'm always looking for a chance to chat somebody up. We turned around, there was a little old black man on the side of the freeway begging for money. And we passed him by and I couldn't help it. I said, I can't do that. We went up and we went and did our errand, came back down. And I only had a 20, so I thought, well, we need to look for opportunities to help when we can. Just lift where we can. I think I've heard that before.
There's a question.
Yes, Kevin? What
was your question? I changed my mind.
Okay, sure.
Okay. It's a little off topic.
That's okay.
Oh, okay, like
change it up.
Do you know the Dr. Seuss story, The Lorax? Yeah, there's a line that really sticks with me, and it says, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not.
Oh, I love that.
That's not off topic.
That's perfect on topic, Gavin.
My grandmother would never let me read Dr. Seuss. I was reading Black Hawk and other stuff. So that was beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, very appropriate. Very appropriate. Well, I think we're out of time. I could sit here. So, when I've...
A lot of people brought a lot of nice goodies, so
Okay.
let's make sure. Sometimes people just leave before they.
Yeah.
Whoever brought that nice plate of cheese and crackers and other things.
Thank you to those who brought food, and again, the Iversons they always provide some food in their home.
Well, I'll stick around as long as you want to stick around. Time.
You
Sierra
know,
and I are teaching a workshop tomorrow morning.
Where?
I don't know. I had a chat with my students at USU and found so much anxiety in their eyes and hurting. And I went home and started writing. And I attended a workshop at USU on conflict resolution and healing. But it made me crazy how they break it up into all these little parts. And it was more psychology than anything else. And I thought, that's not how natives would have healed. That's not how we would have dealt with conflict. It would have been more restoring balance, and healing was always a communal affair. It wasn't behind doors or alone. And so I put together this workshop, a 2-hour workshop on indigenous ways of conflict resolution and healing. And I've taught one, and that tomorrow's our second. And Sierra's been really good with helping me get the word out. So we're teaching our second one tomorrow on this kind of model.
Oh, nice.
And so we'll see how it goes. But love to bring it to Salt Lake one day.
I love that. Is Mary here? She was going to.
I haven't seen Mary Meyer.
Yeah.
I haven't seen her.
Okay.
She's Timpanogos chairman, so.
Okay. She was going to offer us an Indigenous blessing. Jeff Olson, would you mind offering us an Indigenous blessing? You're experienced with that kind of a thing. So years ago, Jeff and I worked in an ad agency together, and then I went off somewhere else, and so did he. And then Jeff had just a remarkably difficult episode in his life of a car accident, and he wrote a book about it. I had him years ago come to this group and talk about it. Since then, he's written several other books about his near-death experience and healing through that. And then he's also become very, I guess, conversant would be the word, and maybe embedded in Indigenous culture to help along his journey and help a lot of other people along his journey. Jeff is just a remarkable person. His books are gorgeous and moving, and that's a two-eye scene in my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so hard for some people, sometimes even me, to appreciate that there's a part of life that is mystical, enchanted, that is hard to put in a box and define and categorize, right? Mm-hmm. And Jeff is a master at tapping into that. So,
and he's a dear friend of mine.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
if you have a worldview that everything has a spirit, then all of that becomes possible. We can have those experiences where we can't explain it to anybody without being looked at funny.
Yeah.
But we can all have those experiences if that's our worldview.
I'm sorry, what? Yeah. Well, if you can. Are you able to come up here? Are you?
I can come up.
Okay, that'd be great. I'll have you take my place.
No.
Jeff had a little injury a month or two ago, and so...
Yeah, I had a nasty fall, but I'm upright and moving. So.
Upright and moving.
And what an honor. Gosh, I wasn't expecting this. I wanted to come and listen and learn as I always do. And everything does have a spirit. And we are spirit. We are spirit. And our spirits are connected. And in the spirit of a blessing, I would love it if we had some drums and flute while we did so.
Yeah.
And let's everybody stand up. And in the spirit of connection, just connect. You know, join hands. I mean, literally touch each other. Because that's what's real. That's what's real.
Take Jeff's hand. So I should also say, Jeff you do events and drum circles, and you've done them, and you've spoken all over the world with the top near-death people.
It's a journey I never
dreamed asked for.
Yeah, I'm comfortable on the back row sitting with the people I love. And yet, what an honor to be here. And Darren, I love what you teach. And it is indigenous. And all of us have a root indigenous soul. We come from the same place. And it's our uniqueness and our diversity that makes it interesting. And to listen to one another and learn from one another and be with one another in community and in peace. And so to the Creator, the one that holds our hearts, the one that sees our eyes and teaches us to see straight, may we have dual vision. May we look at both sides of every coin. May we walk in spirit. And may we walk in beauty, honoring the earth beneath our feet, the sky above our heads, and the water, the lifeblood of earth as it flows. May we honor it, protect it, cherish it, and use it differently. sparingly, sharing and cultivating. And as we each go home, may we take into our hearts what we can do as an individual, what we can do as one person, the changes we can make, the shifts that we can create, the words that we can say, the things that we can do, and above all else, the things that we can be to illuminate peace, to connect our hearts not only to each other but to the divine. That we may find that spark within us that is divine, that is light, that is truth, that is beauty, that is peace, that is love. That we might love each other bigger and bolder and better, and love ourselves enough to embrace the truth of who we are. Aho. Aho matakwe asan, all my relations, all my relatives.
Thank you, brother.
So it is. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
He's actually still